So how do we find the person who plays the role of Jesus in Reliving Mark? Welcome back to the behind-the-scenes stories from Reliving Mark, Discovering Jesus in Israel. I'm Carl Kosart, the writer and the host of the series. Today I want to tell you the story of how we found our Jesus character and the interesting experiences we had as people interacted with him during our filming. Since Reliving Mark is all about discovering Jesus, finding the right person to take on that role in our series was crucial. We knew we had to find someone who our viewers could identify with in that role. If they couldn't see that person as being Jesus, then our series would never make it off the ground. He couldn't be too young, too old, too tall, or too short, and he had to have a beard. He also had to be someone who had the demeanor and poise to assume the role of Jesus, and who was also available to film with us for 3 weeks in Israel. With so much writing in that decision, we eventually came to the conclusion it was impossible. We didn't know anyone who could fit the role of Jesus in the series, and we didn't have the time or the resources to find that right person through some sort of casting or talent agency. So instead, we decided just to limit the role of Jesus. Any of the reenactments involving Jesus would require minimal acting experience and would only show the back of Jesus. Our viewers would never in the series see the face of Jesus. This meant that all we needed to do was to find someone who, from the back, had the right kind of hair and beard that would look like Jesus. Although it was not what we wanted, it didn't seem so impossible now. So with that decision made, I reached out to all my contacts asking if they knew anyone who could fit that role and who would be available to help us in Israel. On March 8, I received an email from Iran, our Israeli logistics coordinator, with the subject line, "We may have found our Jesus." Iran said he had a friend in India who was willing to join us for this adventure, and he said he had the perfect hair for the role of Jesus. Turns out his friend had to be in Israel for some personal business, so he could even arrange his schedule around our filming needs. So what did I think? And to help me make a decision, he attached a picture of Amir, but it was only the back of him, since we'd never actually see the face of Jesus in the series. And this was the picture. As the director and I looked at the picture, we agreed the hair was great. And since all we cared about was the way his hair and beard looked like from the back, we didn't worry about what he actually looked like, or if he could even act. Those things were not important. So we extended an invitation for Amir to join us, and he accepted. When I first met Amir in person, I wasn't sure we made the right decision. It was about a week before we started filming, and I was just finishing up on a tour I was leading in Israel. Amir had just flown into Tel Aviv, and so we agreed to pick him up on our tour bus as we headed back to Jerusalem. When he got on the bus, his hair was all disheveled, and he had a really big, bushy beard with all kinds of gray in it. It looked to me more like a biker's beard than a Jesus beard. When I shared my concern with Iran a little bit later, he told me not to worry. Amir would get his hair cut, they would trim and dye his beard, and I would be more than pleasantly surprised with Amir in the role of Jesus. And I was, and all of us were, in fact. It turned out that Amir not only fit the role of the hair and the beard of Jesus from the back, but he was also a natural actor, and especially for the role of Jesus. His poise and demeanor were perfect. Amir assumed the role so amazingly well that we didn't have to limit any of the reenactments with Jesus at all. But not only that, his presence among us in the role of Jesus was a tremendous blessing to our group. It made the message of Jesus in Mark even more alive as we filmed, something I would have never imagined when I first saw that picture of only the back of Amir. It was also interesting to see how tourists reacted to Amir when they saw him dressed as Jesus. People were always curious. They would stop and look, want to talk about what we were doing, visit with Amir, or have their pictures taken with him. Some of the local kids were also so interested in Amir that they kept following him around everywhere. Seeing that happen reminded me of the stories in the Gospels of how children were attracted to Jesus. But of all the interactions people had with Amir, there's one that stands out to me above all the others. It took place while we were taking a break after doing some filming in the Jewish Quarter with Amir in the role of Jesus. A couple of ultra-Orthodox boys had seen us filming, and they were really curious about what we were doing. After following us around for a long time, they finally got the courage to approach us. As they only spoke a little English, they ended up getting into a long and lively conversation with Amir in Hebrew. After the boys left, Amir told us that they wanted to know why he, an Israeli, was willing to play the role of Jesus when Jesus was such a bad person. He said he asked them, who said Jesus was a bad person? They said that's what they had been taught in school. Jesus didn't like the Jewish people. He was a bad person who wanted to destroy Judaism. Amir said he told them that they were mistaken. Jesus was a Jew. Jesus loved the Jewish people, and the Jewish people loved him in return. Jesus helped all kinds of people. And he stood up for the people against the Jewish religious leaders who had become very corrupt. It was those corrupt religious leaders who wanted to kill him. Jesus was not a bad person. What a tremendous blessing it was to be able to have that sort of conversation about Jesus with a group of ultra-Orthodox Jewish boys. Those kinds of conversations rarely happen, since ultra-Orthodox communities do all they can to isolate themselves from the world around them. So who knows what will come from the seeds that were planted in their minds that day about the true identity of Jesus. It's funny as I look back how certain we were that we'd never be able to find anyone to fill the role of Jesus for us. From our perspective, it seemed impossible. The best we could have hoped for based on our own ability was just to have seen the back of Jesus. But God had different plans, however. He not only made the impossible possible, but in connecting us with Amir, He did more than we ever envisioned. We were able to share the good news of Jesus with people who had never really heard about it before. And now, through the release of Reliving Mark, that witness can be shared with many more people around the world. And what a tremendous blessing that is. I have one more behind-the-scenes stories to share with you, but I'll have to save that for next time. It's connected to the most important story of all time, the resurrection of Jesus. So I hope you can join me for that. Until then, take care and thanks for watching.